Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. This is J Robinson Art, and my name is J Robinson. And today we're going to be drawing an adorable squirrel in graphite. And I'll be showing you one of my favorite techniques that I like to use. It's the mapping method. It's simple but powerful. We'll be using a 2B pencil, a brush, some graphite powder, a nice piece of Strathmore paper, and then we'll be using a piece of Xerox paper, which is going to help me measure and plot our main points before we draw. So if you look at the screen, you'll see that there's a square. That square is the same size as the space that the squirrel is photographed within. Then what I'm going to do, and I'm going to show you in a few seconds, but I just want to explain, is I'm going to be measuring a few points like the nose, where the ear tip is, where the back end of the tail is, where the paws are, things like that, just a few areas. And I'm going to be using a sheet of regular paper to measure those and put dots on the paper that I'll be drawing on. Now those little dots are going to be very small, but when I start my freehand drawing, I'll be referencing those dots. So here now, let me show you. So as you can see, and it's a time-lapse video. See, I'm measuring like the corner of the eye, and I'm just putting the dot, and the tip of the ear, and I'm just putting the dot. And these dots are going to help me stay in proportion. I use this a lot for single items like this single squirrel or portrait. And that was just the back end of the squirrel. And now I'm putting where the tree is that he's standing on, and the tip of the tail. Just a few dots. They're just dots. They're not mapping out the shape. They're just giving me an idea of where things are located. So when I start my freehand drawing, I can stay within proportions. Now I'm going to start drawing, and I'm drawing with a 2B pencil. I like to draw very lightly. And what I'm doing is I'm not making basic shapes. I'm actually drawing, freehand drawing the ear shape, the back ear shape, the facial nose, so it's not like I'm using circles or triangles, which are not bad to help form the shape. I'm actually just freehand drawing at this point. But my reference points, or those mapping points, kind of tell me where things are. So again, while I'm drawing, I stay in proportion. I know right now that doesn't make a lot of sense until you try it. But this is a mapping system that I use a lot. So whenever you see a video that already has a drawing on it, I probably use the mapping system to draw it. And I'm getting this shape. And in a few minutes, you're going to see how I'm freehanding the body of this squirrel. And that free-handed body was done just by me staying in proportion to those mapping dots that I used. I think I got a couple of other videos that I'll probably post that shows the mapping system and how effective it can be. But this is just a technique that I use, and I find it to be very, very helpful, especially again, when I'm drawing a single item or a still life or a portrait. I use a lot. It's like a proportional divider, so to speak, or it's almost like a grid, but it's just dots. It's just dots that kind of help me know and map where things are. So see, as you can see, my squirrel shape is starting to take form, and I really like it. I overlapped another still shot so that you could see a little bit more of the squirrel to the left, because unfortunately I'm not a great videographer, but I'll get better in time. But making no excuses for that. Just let's watch the drawing. See, there's the body. There's the overall body of the squirrel. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking a synthetic brush and some graphite powder, and I'm going to start building up what you see behind the squirrel. Call it the background. I just call it values. And this is great because it also helps me to establish tones that I can then adjust my drawing to, as far as how dark or how light I need to go. And by using the brush and the graphite powder, I just get to lay that in quite quickly. And then I can add on top of that, because the graphite powder is very light, it's easy to erase, it's easy to draw over, it's easy to refine. So I make use of all the tools that I can when I'm drawing. Sometimes I use my stump as a drawing tool as well as a blending tool. So now I'm going in with the number 2 pencil, and I'm going to start drawing the eye. And I'm going to actually draw it really dark, and I'm going to leave the highlights, and then I'll start drawing around it, and then I'll start making fur marks, which I think are critical. Sometimes you don't really need me to narrate. You can just kind of watch and see what I'm doing. Where I really want you to pay attention to, or take a look at if you can, is the body of that squirrel. I mean, it was a freehand drawing, and just those few little mapping dots helped me to stay in proportion. That's all I really wanted to show you. But now I'm going to show you my technique for drawing in the values on a subject like this. And here I'm using the stump to put in a light shadow or light value that I can then build on. Because the one thing I like to do is draw to build. I don't draw to final. Maybe the eye is final because it was really dark, but everything else in this drawing is going to take a little while to do. The video is about 32 minutes long, but the actual drawing took me probably about 3 or 4 hours, to be honest with you. But you see how I use the stump as a drawing tool? The graphite that's on it, I use it to help build up values and kind of lay in a little foundation for me to build on. I do that a lot. Now, I know that that's something that they say you're supposed to use your stump only when you don't want to see no more of the paper. But I just find the stump is a great tool. Just like a mono eraser is not for me just to erase. I actually draw with it as well. Now I'm coming back in with my 2B pencil just to start putting in some lines, some dots, some marks, if you will, to try to indicate the fur. Now, the key to the fur on any animal is to pay attention to the direction, because the direction of the fur is going to help you establish a very good drawing. If you make everything in the same direction, it's just going to look flat, because it's not. Some parts of the squirrel, the direction is up and down, left and right, a little bit at a 45-degree angle. It just really depends on the curvature and where the fur is actually being displayed. So you need to pay attention to the reference picture to see what direction the fur is going in, so that when you start your drawing or starting to add values, as I am, you maintain that direction. No matter how light or how dark you're going to go, directional drawing is key. It's like perspective. It's almost like you have to pay attention to where the fur bends left, where it bends right, where it bends straight up and down. I mean, that's key. It's just going to help you establish a better drawing. Now, again, you can just disregard that and draw to your heart's content. But for me, I'm always trying to improve myself. So whenever I do projects like this, that I'm not trying to sell, that I'm not trying to put in any kind of a contest, then this is a value study. This is a hand-eye coordination study. This is a pencil pressure study. This is a stump pressure study. So any of the tools that I'm using, I'm now using this as a learning experience for me to improve my drawing for future drawings. So while the squirrel is going to come out to me quite cute, quite nice, quite handsome, I'm not trying to make this a for sale item. I'm using this as a learning curve, not only for my mapping, but for all the other things that I mentioned, plus more. I mean, there's so much you can get out of just practicing. where you can just relax and not worry about trying to make everything perfect, but trying to learn as you go, trying to see how you can incorporate different techniques and how you apply them. Even though I'm staying in the fur direction, it's about the gradations. It's about where the darks are, where the lights are. How do I build that up slowly? How do I communicate to you as the viewer that this is a soft, furry animal? That is not just a flat drawing, that it has a little bit of dimension, has a little bit of texture. So my goal is to also become like the drawing scientist and try to figure out a language that can speak to the viewers so they can kind of interpret what I've laid down once it's completed, of course. I mean, as you're working, I like to think that everything becomes a little abstract and then you pull it back together to refine it. So the drawing goes through a lot of stages. And see here now, I'm using the mono eraser as a tool to lift, but in the direction of the fur. So I can make the spots and the spaces that are there and then go back lightly with values and have it like patch up for me. There's a lot going on in this drawing. There's a lot that I really cannot describe as much as I can ask you to draw something like this and experience it firsthand. But you get a look at the technique, you getting a look at how I lay down my foundations, you're getting a look at how I build up my values, how I build up my fur, how I try to make it look soft, how I try to separate things so you can clearly see arms, legs, and all of that, just with subtle values, playing light against dark, dark against light, because all of that is key when you're drawing. When you get a new set of pencils or you practice in value studies with the squares where you're going from light to dark, this is why you do that. This is the reason, other than it being boring to some people, it should be exciting to everyone that draws, because those little studies are going to help you be able to do something like this. Because now you need to be able to apply those graded values in a way that mimics your reference to help build your drawing. This is not about the number 2B pencil being, because it's the only one that I'm using at this time, being one value. This is about seeing what ranges of values I can get with these small marks, with these dark marks, with these light and mid-tone marks, and how many of those gradations can I get in? You know, sometimes your studies are 9 boxes, sometimes they're 12 boxes. But if you look at that squirrel's reference, it's probably maybe 15 or 20 different values going on over there. How do I communicate that? I'm really not going to leave anything pure white. I have to even make what appears to be white some kind of a value. But how do I communicate that? And that becomes the challenge. That becomes the reason you practice. That becomes the reason you try to figure out how to draw as often as possible, so that no matter the subject, whether it's a squirrel, whether it's a lion, whether it's a dog, whether it's a cat, whether it's a buffalo, whether it's a zebra, no matter what the animal, this particular squirrel's practice will teach me how to then apply these techniques to those various different animals. And then not only animals. What if you're drawing someone that has on a coat that has some kind of fur or leather or corduroy or suede? Like, how do you communicate those textures with values? Everything you draw, even if it's flat, it's values. So value studies are important. Pencil pressure is important. How you use your tools is important. Do you want your mono to just be an eraser? Fine. Do you want your stump to just be a blender? Fine. But if you want those tools to be more, then you have to practice to learn how to make them more. And sometimes your buildup, as you notice, like, look how much time I've spent just on the front part of the squirrel. I'm not even concerned with the back or the tail. I'm focused in specific areas right now. And those are the only areas that are important to me in my drawing. I'm trying to establish a relationship with this picture so that when we start going back and forth, it'll start giving me what I want as far as a look, as far as a feel. Will it be 100% perfect? No. But if I can just achieve what I like to call the high 90s, or in some cases, some great 80s, I'm okay, because I'm going to take those numbers and increase them as I continue to practice, as I continue to draw. And it doesn't matter that I've been drawing for a long time. And it doesn't matter that I quickly free-handed this squirrel's body shape. Now I have to go inside and pull out all of that texture. And that becomes a new challenge. So once I accomplish one thing, that doesn't give me the right to feel like I've accomplished everything. No. Okay, so I got that all right. Now let's see if I can continue with an all right value for kind of rendition. And I'm saying it this way because I know that a lot of people are really hard on themselves. They make mistakes and they want to tear the paper up. They want to quit. They want to stop. But to me, mistakes are the best learning tool you could ever have, because they teach you what not to do. And in some cases, you could actually make a mistake that turns out to be something that you can use. You know, mistakes could be where you can say, oh, wow, I made a mistake, but I like the way that looks, or I like how I did that. So even though I didn't want to use it for that, maybe in a future picture, I can use it for this. I mean, it's like Post-its. Post-its didn't start out as Post-its. They started out as something else. They turned into Post-its when what they were trying to achieve initially didn't work. And you can look that up. I can't remember exactly what Post-its were meant for initially, but I do know they didn't start out as Post-its, okay? And now Post-its are part of our office lives, for those of you who work in offices. So when you make a mistake, don't get all bent out of shape. Be happy that you were able to be in the midst of doing something that you even made a mistake. So at least you're trying. You're putting forth the effort. And no matter how long you draw, no matter how good you get, I think you're always going to make mistakes. Sometimes you're just rushing. Sometimes you're just overlooking things. And sometimes we forget about the basics. Sometimes we like to think we're so good, we don't need the basics. We don't need to practice drawing circles. We don't need to make squares. We don't need to stroke lines. We're too good for that. We're drawing squirrels and wildebeests and chimpanzees. Why do I need to practice with those rudimentary uh, practicing value studies? Because they make you better. They make you better. They help you improve where you are. And they help you not to forget the basics so that when you need them, you can pull them out of your hat. I like to always say, and I'm sorry because I know people are going to say, well, why are you talking about all of this stuff? If you listen carefully, I'm trying to tell you something. When you look at any of the greats in any of the sports or athletics that are out there, pick one. Pick a superstar. That superstar practices. That superstar doesn't just negate the time off. The times that you don't see them on the field performing at their highest level. They're in a gym or on a field or somewhere in the times that you don't see them practicing. Some people practice all day. Some people practice all during the off season. And then when they come back in, they practice even more because practicing helps you maintain what you have. And then it also helps you go higher from where you are. How you practice, what you're practicing, that's a whole nother subject. Because if you're practicing wrong, then you're going to always be wrong. But if you open yourself up to be your own critic or allow someone else to criticize your work and you hear them, you can take that criticism or your self criticism and improve. But if you want to be stuck on stupid, and I hate to say it that way, but that's what I'm just trying to say. If you just want to be stuck on not trying to improve because you think you all of that in a bag of chips and who are you to tell me what to do and how to do it? Well, you pay the piper. You pay the price later when you don't find yourself improving and you find yourself constantly making the same mistakes. You find yourself constantly being challenged by the same thing. And that's why it's good to vary your subjects. That's why it's good to vary your mediums. If you're not good at oils, I would highly recommend you do some oils. If you're not good at watercolors, I would highly recommend you do some watercolors. If you're really great at drawing, then you can take your great drawing skills and techniques to oils, to watercolors. But you have to play with the mediums to understand how you can do that. See, sometimes when I'm drawing, I like to call these washes. I like to consider myself building up the values as if I'm doing some watercolor buildups. If I'm layering, if I'm glazing, it to me, it's all the same thing. It's just a different tool, but that tool is being held in my hand and it's being watched through my eyes. And I have to do the hand-eye coordination to make it all work. So why can't I take that brush and be dipping in watercolor and doing the same thing, except slightly differently? And then once I accomplish myself in other mediums, I could come back to my comfort zone. Or once I try different subject matters, I could come back to my comfort zone and be even better because I've learned to overcome the weaknesses of myself. The weaknesses that I let myself stay in because I'm afraid to step out of my comfort zone. This drawing, like I told you, took several hours. Someone could look at just the time I said and say, well, I'm not going to sit there and draw no picture for no doggone 5 hours. But what if you could sit there and draw a picture and just forget about time? Don't think about the 5 hours. Don't think about counting the time or clocking the time, but just drawing. And however long it takes, it takes. I think you would see that those 5 hours aren't really 5 hours like you being held to a standard of 5-hour drawing. I think you realize that sometimes taking your time is better than rushing. And trust me, I do a lot of journal entries. I do a lot of doodling. I do a lot of quick sketches. But when I'm drawing, I try not to be in that same mindset. I want to look at the reference and pull from it as much information as possible. So that causes me to have to slow down from my journal thinking, from my doodling thinking, from my quick drawing thinking. And there's nothing wrong with all of it. But sometimes you have to readjust because of what it is you're trying to accomplish. So if I really want to accomplish as much of the details in this squirrel, then I have to, one, not really think about the time. And two, I have to take my time. I can't rush. I can't just go in really dark and then when I need to adjust and erase, I can't because I've added too much graphite to the paper. So for me, it's easier to do it as you see me doing it. Little areas at a time, building up the values, laying down foundations, making tiny little marks. I couldn't even tell you how many marks I've actually put on this paper that are like little dots and little dashes. Probably thousands, literally thousands, to make that fur, because that's what I need to do to get that. I can't get it just by blending out a color and blending another color on top. I have to be cognizant of the marks, of the fur's values. And again, you're going to see when I finish this drawing that my drawing is much lighter than the reference. But when you're drawing a picture as painting a picture, you can work on it later. Just because I finish in this video, you're going to see in the end a posted picture without the overhead light, and it's going to be a lot darker because after I finished shooting this video and I took some time to criticize and evaluate my work, one of the things I said to myself was I could have gone darker. So I did. I just did it in my own space, in my own studio, in my own time. But I'm going to post a picture for you so you could then see the after effect, because you're never really finished. But not to be or toot my own horn, but and anybody could argue with me and put whatever they want in the chat, and I'll be more than happy to accept your criticism. But this squirrel is coming out quite nice. This squirrel, from where it started with just some dots on a paper to indicate a nose, the top of an ear, the tail, and the sketch that I did in relationship to those dots, free-handed, to give me the squirrel body. Now I'm going in with these values. My squirrel is starting to come to life. And that's the key. That's the exchange. That's what I was after. I'm after what you're seeing happen here, where the squirrel and the sheet of paper and a few tools is starting to take on a life. You see the glassine paper that I use to protect the paper from smudging, but as I move it and you get to see the whole squirrel, it's not a bad drawing. And I can't really say that it's a great drawing, but I definitely could tell you it's not a bad drawing. And that drawing of this squirrel is going to cause me to want to continue. And maybe I'll just make some videos of the grid drawing so you can kind of see how that works. And the grid, I find, is one of the greatest learning tools that whoever invented the grid could have done. You're drawing a lot of boxes, and anyway, when we get to the grid drawings, we'll talk about the grid drawings. Right now, we're looking at a mapping drawing and a freehand drawing and value studies. So let's focus on that, because as you can see, I'm constantly just building up the values, even in the tail, leaving some sparse openings, and just adding values to help build up my squirrel. The video is probably about 4 minutes away from completion. You're going to see the finished drawing where I'll do my summation. And then at the very end, you're going to see what I did off camera. And I apologize. I do that a lot. I make videos and I go back later on because sometimes you don't really see things right away. Sometimes you got to, like I said, criticize your own work, evaluate your own work. Criticism isn't always bad. It's an evaluation. You're looking at things from a fresh eye. Right now, I'm looking at it, or when I was drawing it, from that eye. But once I finished drawing it and I put it to the side and drew some other things and then took a look at it, I reevaluated what I thought would be more conducive of putting extra values into the drawing. So I did it, and that's coming up in a few minutes. But listen, before I go, I just want to say this. I hope you enjoyed this. And if you did, please give the video a thumbs up or a like. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more. And please add any comments that you wish. I'm not that thin-skinned, so I appreciate it. We're coming down to the 2-minute mark. So I hope you enjoyed this. It was fun for me to see this picture come to life. I love taking a blank anything, a blank canvas, a blank watercolor paper, a blank drawing paper, a blank pastel paper, and just watch it come to life. I get a big kick out of taking the time to take a blank anything and turn it into something that I want to save and put in my portfolio. And this is definitely going to go into my portfolio. It's like a 9x12 Strathmore paper, drawing paper. Now I'm just adding some texture and value to the tree limb so it doesn't look like he's floating in the air. But again, I think my squirrel is cute. I think for a freehand drawing from a few mapping out dots, this isn't a bad drawing, and anybody can do this. If I can do it, anybody can do it. This is not magic. This is not cheating. This is just drawing. This is just making use of the tools so that you can get the best out of it. That's what it's all about as far as I'm concerned. So here we come into the wrap up. Yeah, I like drawing this. This was fun. Okay, so here's the finished drawing with the overhead light still, but you can see that my drawing is very light, but look at my squirrel. He's there. He's there. And then in a few seconds, you're going to see the picture change to a single shot where you're going to see just the finished drawing without the overhead light, and that's important. The overhead light makes things lighter. And you're going to see that I went back in and added more value to my squirrel. But for right now, just mapping out the way that I did, it's not bad. It's not a bad technique. It's something that you can build on, something that you can practice, something that you can add into your arsenal of tools. Okay, here comes my finished picture. And take a look at this. See? Added more values, went in dark, did the background dark, the tree, the fur around his back end area, his legs, underneath his body, around his chin, and just on his body a little bit. But thank you for joining me. I hope you had fun. See you next time.